before the president of Ghana, President John Dramani Mahama, giving a solidarity endorsement to the Pan-African Protocol. But what did he say to you behind closed doors?
His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana, President John Dramani Mahama, did not say anything to me behind closed doors that he didn't say in public. He was unequivocal, he was clear, he was precise that the time has come to endow the Pan-African Parliament with additional functions and responsibilities to enable it to achieve its mandate. We believe that the mandate of the Pan-African Parliament is clear. And it requires additional functions, and this will help us because, you see, we have a mandate to speak for the people of Africa, to represent the people of Africa, to be a platform for African people and their grassroots organizations to make an input into the decision-making process of the African Union in finding solutions to the problems facing our continent. And how do you do this? If you take, for instance, one of the major issues on our continent is the low level of intra-Africa trade. Intra-Africa trade, if improved on our continent, because currently the level of intra-African trade is about 12%, compared to the European Union member states have achieved over 60%. And recent studies have shown that if we're able to improve intra-Africa trade by as much as 2% in a year, then African countries will be retaining in this continent additional income in excess of 5 times the amount of international donor assistance that we get in a year on the continent.
Now, reading in between the lines of what the AU chairperson, Mrs. Lamine Zuma, said, that the Pan-African Parliament should concentrate on facing the issue of poverty, does this in any way suggest that she's not really keen on ratifying the legal instrument of the Pan-African Parliament?
Her Excellency, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, was very clear in her support for additional functions for the Pan-African Parliament to enhance the role of this Parliament. She was very clear about it. And I believe that, yes, the Pan-African Parliament has a major role to play in ensuring poverty reduction on our continent, to reduce the suffering of African people. And we think that the key to it is governance. And that is why we have at the Parliament tackled issues of governance. We're convinced that if we can have transparent and accountable governments in member states, then they will be able to utilize Africa's abundant resources to manage the resource utilization and application in a manner that it will benefit majority of our long-suffering citizens who are wallowing in poverty, hunger, and disease. It is the issue that has brought to fore our consistent support for the African Charter on democracy, elections, and governance. Because we think that if there is good governance, if there is proper management and utilization of available resources, we can lift a larger population of our people from poverty to improved standard of living.
Now, one issue that came up during the plenary was the issue of funding. As a matter of fact, the Ugandan delegates said that anytime there was a request for committee projects, that the usual cliche they get is no monetary provision. How would you react to this?
Yes, we do have financial constraints. The Pan-African Parliament is mostly funded from the African Union. We realize that also we represent not very rich countries. We have a parliament that should be able to cut his coat according to his cloth. We try to work within the resources available to us. We also have partners who are supporting the work we do. And they determine which areas they want to support. But we determine what we want to do. So some are interested in supporting governance issues. Some want to support issues of democracy, election monitoring. Some want to support issues of advocacy to strengthen the parliament. But we are very, very, very conscious of ensuring that the partners do not dictate to us what are the important issues for us. So sometimes it creates a little difficulty, but we insist that partnership is partnership, equal footing, irrespective of who's bringing the money to the table. And we're convinced that a lot of our partners understand this, and many have continued to support us over the years. So we do have financial difficulties as an institution, but then we must realize that we're working for a poor continent.
So now let's quickly look at the issue of the provisional budget for 2013. Aren't you worried that out of the total budget estimate of 15 million US dollars, just a little above 3 million US dollars is budgeted for program cost? Is this agenda likely to make any much impact?
Well, we have a structure here where, yes, I agree, a lot of money is spent on staff costs. But this is because the staff who work here are more or less staff of the African Union, and they are paid by the standards of the African Union. So it's not something we have any control over. So based on that, the African Union budget for the Pan-African Parliament of about $10.5 million, close to 70% of it goes on staff issues to maintain the staff structure that we need to get the work done. But of course, it's important to have a secretariat that has the capacity to support the work that we do. And then a lot of the programs that we carry out here are funded by partners, like I said earlier. But we also insist that those partners fund what we want to do, what we have decided we want to do. They can come and pick and choose out of the list of what we want to do, which ones they're willing to fund. But we will not allow anybody else to impose their own mission or vision on the Pan-African Parliament. And that's why we've had these constraints of adequate funding. But we will continue to do the work that we need to do with the little resources that are available to us.
Now, how do you integrate the regional parliament and the national parliament into your agenda as the president of the Pan-African Parliament?
We, as a parliament of the African Union, have a responsibility to work closely with the regional parliaments and national parliaments. And so we always ensure that we tie them along by joint workshops, joint programs, joint retreats. We have established here at the Pan-African Parliament an annual retreat, which we call the African Speakers Conference, where we invite all speakers of national parliaments and presidents of national assemblies and the speakers of the regional parliaments to deliberate on African issues. In fact, it happens to be the only forum where we can have African leaders of legislatures on our continent, both national and regional, sit to discuss African issues without any foreign country being involved. If you go to the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, where we have a speakers conference, you have all the former Commonwealth colonies across the globe. If you go to and it's only Commonwealth, it doesn't include the non-British former colonies. If you go to the IPU, you have all the parliaments in the world, the International Parliamentary Union. But here, African leaders of national parliaments and regional parliaments sit down and discuss African issues. And because we have noticed that the African Union Summit is mostly an executive affair, you find the heads of states and at the heads of state summit, you find the foreign ministers at the executive council or other meetings of ministers of various other departments, agriculture, labor, at the executive council level. Then at the PLC level, which is the Permanent Representative Committee, you find ambassadors appointed from the executive, of course, sitting in the PLC. And so the legislative arm of government is completely removed from the processes at the African Union. But there's an urgent need that those decisions that are being taken at the African Union be translated to legislations in the national governments. And those budgets of member states at the national level require a parliamentary input. So there's a disconnect. So every year, after the July summit, we host the African Speakers Conference with the motive to connect the African Union Summit decisions and discuss them with the speakers of national parliaments and create a bridge that will ensure that a lot of the decisions taken at the AU are also communicated and discussed with heads of national and regional legislatures so that we can form a synergy and a collaboration that will enhance the whole process of integration on our continent.
Now, before we end this interview, let's just quickly look at the agenda for 2063, which is making a loud vision now, and with the forthcoming, the AU Summit, which has been focused on the Golden Jubilee anniversary. What are your expectations?
I think that while we are celebrating 50 years of the formation of the Organization of African Unity and now the African Union, we must take time off to think about what the future holds for our continent. I believe that a lot has been achieved over the years. One of the major achievements of the African Organization of African Unity was in the independence for many member states. And of course, a lot of them started off with clear visions on how Africa should move and develop. But of course, then came other external forces, the Cold War, the strong divisions between the East and the West, America and Russia, the Soviet Union, now helped polarize societies in Africa. And of course, military coups were supported by different groups for different reasons. And so we went through an era of military dictatorships across our continent. And that's helped to kill the vision of many of our founding fathers. But that's why there's an urgent need for our leaders to begin to plan and implement those plans urgently. If not, you can imagine what that large population of young people can be put to if their energies are not properly harnessed.
Honorable Bethel Amadi, thank you very much indeed for coming on this edition of Network Africa. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Benga. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure.